Something buried beneath Skinwalker Ranch awakened on a freezing night in January 2026, long before anyone understood what they were about to disturb. The first alarm triggered at exactly 2:17 a.m., breaking the silence of the remote monitoring station and sending a ripple of confusion through the overnight crew. At first it seemed like another equipment glitch, the kind that occasionally plagued the isolated facility, but within minutes, every instrument pointed to the same impossible truth. Something vast was hidden beneath the desert soil. The underground imaging system revealed a hollow space far deeper than any known geological formation in the region. Technicians initially dismissed it as a sensor error caused by a recent electromagnetic storm sweeping across the area. Yet when they recalibrated the system, the void reappeared sharper and more defined than before, as if responding to their attention. Its shape was too precise, too structured to belong to nature. Dr. Ethan Cole, the lead geophysicist, stood frozen in front of the glowing monitor as the data continued updating itself. The void stretched across an impossible width, forming angles that suggested deliberate design rather than erosion or collapse. Something beneath them had geometry that should not exist underground. And worse, it seemed centered directly beneath their excavation zone. By sunrise, the entire research team had gathered in the control trailer, reviewing decades of geological surveys. No record, satellite image, or seismic report had ever hinted at such a structure. The ranch had always been known for strange anomalies, but this was different. This was not behavior from the land, it felt like concealment. As night returned, the equipment began acting on its own. Compass needles spun violently, batteries drained within seconds, and radio signals degraded into static. The anomaly below pulsed at steady intervals, like a heartbeat syncing with the planet itself. And deep within the soil, faint vibrations echoed upward, resembling distant knocks on a sealed door. Within days, excavation began despite growing unease among the crew. Heavy machinery tore into the earth under constant surveillance, floodlights turning the desert into a harsh, artificial daylight. Yet the deeper they dug, the colder the air became, as if winter itself was trapped beneath the surface. No one could explain it, but everyone felt it. Something metallic finally surfaced after days of digging. It was not rock, not machinery in any modern sense, but a smooth, dark surface that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Its curvature suggested something enormous buried below, far larger than the excavation zone could contain, and etched across it were symbols no database could translate. That night, strange disturbances began spreading through the camp. Cameras flickered, recordings corrupted, and security systems rebooted without command. Some workers swore they heard footsteps moving beneath them, even though the ground below was solid. Others reported whispers that seemed to rise from the soil itself, calling their names in voices they recognized but could not place. Then came the dreams. Entire crews began sharing the same nightmare, a colossal door buried in endless darkness, waiting patiently for something to remember it. Some saw hands reaching from beneath it, while others saw only eyes staring back through infinite cracks. The disturbing part was not the dream itself, but the consistency between those who had never spoken about it. Dr. Cole tried to suppress the growing panic by focusing on data and procedure. Psychological evaluations were ordered, environmental scans repeated, and every logical explanation exhausted. But logic began to feel increasingly fragile as the nights grew louder with unseen activity. Even he could not ignore the sensation that something beneath them was aware. On the 19th day, the excavation finally revealed its full form. It was not a structure built across time, nor a geological formation shaped by nature. It was a door, impossibly large, sealed without visible seams, resting beneath centuries of silence. And the moment it was fully exposed, the ground itself seemed to exhale. The first whispers began the night the door was uncovered completely. At first, they were mistaken for wind passing through equipment or radio interference bleeding between channels. But the voices grew clearer, more deliberate, forming words that carried names spoken by people long dead, and each name belonged to someone listening. A security officer named Marcus was the first to admit what he heard. While patrolling near the perimeter, he heard his brother's voice behind him, speaking softly, as if standing just out of sight. His brother had died years earlier in a car accident, Yet the voice sounded unmistakably real. When Marcus turned, nothing was there. Others soon came forward with similar experiences. Some heard parents, others childhood friends, and some heard voices they could not recognize but still felt deeply personal. The voices did not just speak, they responded, reacting to thoughts the listeners had never spoken aloud. It was as if something beneath the soil was learning them. Dr. Cole refused to accept supernatural explanations, ordering full system diagnostics and psychological containment protocols. But every instrument returned normal readings, even as reality around them continued to distort. That contradiction became the most terrifying part. Nothing was wrong, yet everything was. Security footage soon captured the impossible. Figures appeared near the excavation site at night, moving in unnatural silence. They resembled human shapes, but lacked consistency, shifting slightly between frames as if reality could not hold them steady. When security teams arrived, the figures were gone without trace. The footage was reviewed repeatedly, each viewing more disturbing than the last. Some silhouettes seemed to pass through equipment, while others disappeared mid-step. No footprints were ever found, and yet the cameras insisted something had been there. Sleep became nearly impossible. Workers woke screaming from identical dreams of descending corridors and sealed chambers stretching infinitely downward. One researcher, Sarah, began sketching symbols she saw in those dreams, only to realize they matched the carvings on the buried door exactly. She had never studied them consciously. By the fourth night, the atmosphere at the ranch had shifted into something unstable. People avoided standing alone, refusing to stay near the excavation even during daylight. Fear had stopped being emotional and had become environmental, like temperature or pressure. Ethan finally witnessed the breaking point through the security monitors. A shadow moved across the site, then stopped and turned toward the camera. For a brief second, its face became visible through the distortion. It was his own face staring back from the darkness. The chamber did not open like anything built or discovered before. It reacted, as if something inside had decided the waiting was over. The sealed door beneath the excavation trembled for the first time in recorded history, and the entire ranch fell into unnatural silence. A massive electromagnetic surge erupted from deep underground, instantly disabling every monitoring system across the facility. Backup generators failed without warning, plunging sections of the camp into darkness. Even emergency systems refused to respond, as if something had rewritten the rules of operation itself. Machines shut down one after another, their operators screaming as control panels filled with unreadable symbols. The metal surface of the door began vibrating violently, producing a sound that felt less like noise and more like pressure against the mind. The vibrations seemed to form rhythm, almost like language. Cracks of light appeared along the sealed structure, pulsing in unnatural synchronization. The etched symbols glowed like burning circuitry, responding to something awakening beneath them. Several researchers collapsed instantly, overwhelmed by nausea and disorientation. A deep mechanical tone echoed through the soil, growing louder with each passing second. It sounded like enormous locks releasing after centuries of pressure. Each release carried a sense of recognition, as if the structure was remembering how to function. The sound intensified until it felt like the entire desert was screaming beneath itself. People covered their ears, but the noise was not external. It seemed to exist inside thought itself. Ethan realized the pattern resembled communication, though no human language matched it. Panic erupted across the excavation site. Orders were shouted, but few were obeyed as workers stared at the door in paralysis. The floodlights flickered, and shadows stretched in directions that defied geometry. Then the door moved. A grinding shift echoed through stone and metal as a narrow opening formed. From within, absolute darkness poured outward, deeper than absence, heavier than night. Cold mist escaped the chamber, defying gravity as it rose into the air. Those who inhaled it experienced flashes of memories that did not belong to them. Some fell to their knees, overwhelmed by emotions they could not identify. Something inside the darkness became aware of those watching. People described feeling observed from every direction at once. The presence was not seen, it was understood. Ethan stepped forward despite every instinct warning him to stop. Inside the gap, he saw movement deeper than space itself. something that did not belong to any known dimension. Then the darkness blinked back. The first disappearance occurred without sound. A technician simply vanished near the threshold, erased mid-motion. Cameras recorded only distortion where he had stood. Panic turned into chaos as more workers fled, but escape routes shifted, looping back on themselves. The desert itself seemed unstable, reshaping paths in real time. Ethan lost all communication as radios filled with whispering voices. The voices spoke personal thoughts no one had shared aloud. Even silence felt occupied. He realized then that the chamber had never been a structure. It was a seal. Something ancient had been held back beneath the ranch for reasons no human history recorded. And they had broken it. The entity extended itself into the world. Not fully formed, not fully physical, but enough to be perceived differently by every observer. Fear gave it shape and memory gave it identity. It stepped further into reality, and the world began to collapse in perception. Gravity faltered, distance lost meaning, and time fractured unevenly across the site. People no longer agreed on what they were seeing. Ethan activated his recorder as everything unraveled. He understood this might be the last coherent moment of human understanding. His final words were not instructions, but warning. The transmission ended in static as something vast moved closer. Beneath the desert, the chamber remained open, and whatever had been sealed inside was no longer waiting.